Okay, let's just get started again. So we talked about how he came to power. So Park Chung-hee came to power when he was 43 by military coup. And he is very controversial leader. It's because of its economic policy. So he adopted state-led and top-down economic development, and then he also started Semao movement. Let me explain these three. I mean, Korean students are very familiar with what it is, but international students maybe have a hard time to understand what it is. Usually, like in a Western society, when we have economic development, the state is not central. Is not a center. So usually, like market or business is a center. But when we have economic development in South Korea, state was always center and play a significant role. And then why that happened and when did it happen? It happens during the Park Chung-hee's regime. So state lead and top down is actually the same thing, right? And then Sebao movement is for rural society. So when the Korea was developed and it developed from the city center and then later on it spread out to the rural society. But the strong supporters are not from cities, but supporters of Park Chung-hee usually live in a rural area. In a rural area, but rural area couldn't develop during the Park Chung-hee. So he was worried what if his strong supporters started to against him. So that's why he started a new movement. We call this Semaul movement. And because of this kind of movement, South Korea has been developed and then transformed from very agricultural society to industrialized society. But we also should talk about like major fault that Park Chung-hee did. The first thing is deterrence of democracy. Uh, so, but not only that, I mean, during his regime, so he declared Yushin system. Yushin system. That means he started to dictatorships from 1963 to 1979. His major fault is not just about like violence of human rights. So he established the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, that's KCIA, right? And then he used this anti-communism sentiment to people. So if there are people who against him, then he's saying like, he got the idea from communism, or he's a communism sympathizer. That's why he's like that. So no one, I mean, we need justifiable reason to get rid of someone or to punish, right? So he put this reason to the person who opposed him. That's what Park Chung-hee did. So for me, I mean, he deterred democracy of Korea, but that's not it. I mean, he completely abolished the idea of development of communism. So I'm not saying like communism is perfect. Communism isn't perfect. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. That's why communist country collapsed. But I wanted to argue that we may can extract good thing or good side of it, but we lost their we lost our chance for that. It's because of the Yushin system. Uh, During Yushin system, if you are against the government, then you may go to jail or you may be tortured. And KCIA actually work for the maintain his power like that way. So they help how he could he find. I mean, the KCIA usually try to find a person who against who are against him or opposition party leaders or opposition activists. They try to find out and they torture or sometimes kill like that. So that's how KCI worked. And then during those times, there is a huge violation of human rights. So that's a major fault. But let's talk about his personal traits. look at the personal characteristics. So he pursued innovative economy policies uh, to overcome his poverty. So when we look at his like how he where he was born or how he grew like that, then we can notice that at the time, not only him but also everyone at the time was really poor. They had to fight for poverty. So one thing he was sincere towards South Korea is overcoming poverty. So he wanted to get rid of poverty in Korea. So that's why he could pursue very innovative economic policies. I mean, I do not like him much. And then I do not like his daughter as well. But one thing I want to acknowledge is that both of them, quite sure, I can feel that both of them love our country. That's I think that's very genuine. I mean, that's very sincere. But it doesn't mean that what they did for the country is good things. I mean, sometimes uh, love itself cannot be justified, right? So I think I wanted to say, or I think it's very genuine, sincere that Park Jung-hee wanted to overcome the poverty of Korea. And then his implementation, so when he implement the policy, export-oriented policy, but I'm not sure if at the time the leader is different, Korea could overcome like this way. Korea could grow economically this fast and this much. So organizational and meticulous policy implementing ability that we should acknowledge as well. So he stick to one policy that was export-oriented policy, and then he stick to it, and then he push the policy, even though sometimes he had a difficult time and economic crisis, but he overcome all these things. So he has such an ability, but no, I mean it's not easy to have that kind of ability. That's kind of one thing that his characteristic. The third thing is persistent policy promoting capability. It's not easy to stick. I mean, it's not easy to stick just one policy and promoting that policy and then lead to succeed. It's not easy, but he has such a capability, and he has a capability of appointment of the right people for the right job. I think that's the what leader should have. That's what leader should have, or what the virtue of a leader, I think. So when we talk about what is a good leader, who is a good leader, what characteristic the leader has, I think the most important thing is he or she should appoint the right person for the right job, because he cannot do their jobs, right? So president may just order or appoint. That's the most important jobs for the president. And appointment of the right people for the right job, I think it's most important things as a leader. And he has that capacity as well. And he is a dictator. I mean, he always admired Napoleon. That means he has a very dictatorial characteristic inside of his mind. And then he has a very dictatorial and repressive characters inside of his mind. And then he has kind of either or nor, right? So he has either black or white. So he has a very clear answer for everything. So he has very clear preference. So if he like it, then he go for it. But if he doesn't like it, then he just kill the people who against him. So that's his characteristics. And then he also has a lack of awareness of reality and public support. I mean, he was widely supported by people, but we should know that there was a demonstration against him and there was a strike against him. But since he maintained very repressive government, so people, even though people do not like him, they can't actually against him. But he didn't know, and he thinks that everyone likes him. That's the problem, right? And then if you look at the times that he was born and grow. So he was born in very sad era, right? Because it was colonized era. During the Japanese colonization, he was born, and he actually observed what happened during the Japanese militarism, and poverty was prevailed. And then he also observed while he after he came back from the war or the Japanese colonization, he actually observed what happened for the Isungman or for the country. So Isungman was actually civilian. He wasn't military or anything like that. But Isungman also became a dictatorship later on. But he lost his power because he couldn't succeed any economic growth. So people didn't support him any longer. So Isungman was a dictatorship. So he actually observed, and he also observed April 19th revolution. So because of this April 19th revolution, Isungman government lost his power completely. And then that's why he was afraid of any revolution or resistance by people. He wanted to maintain his power quite a long time. And then he also observed what happened during Korean War. I mean, he should thank to the Korean War, right? Because of Korean War, he could get his job back. If there's no Korean War whatsoever, then he would become just a normal citizen or like a teacher like that. But because of this Korean War occur, he could get his job back and he could be a president. But one thing I wanted to emphasize that he lived in a very sadness era, age of sadness because of the poverty. The one thing that he promised to the people is that he will save people from this poverty, and he kept his promise. That's why he is categorized as a controversial leader, but not the worst case of leader. Even though he violated human rights, and he killed a lot of people, but we can't just say that he's a worst case leader or worst leader in the world because of this reason. And then if we look at both sides, the personal traits and times, then he is very goal directed and he's opportunist, right? Goal was modernization and economic growth. And then because of war and poverty, we wanted to overcome this modernization, industrialization, and economic development. And he set the goal and he achieved these goals. And identified dictator, so he admired Napoleon. He did not hesitate himself as a dictator. He wanted to be actually dictator. Then reasons it's because of Japanese colonizations. And then realistic, he's not. I mean, he is not. He is realistic, but at the same time, he's very ideological. Oh, I didn't finish. I have more.